Welcome all live to the Ultimate Hockey Show for your Monday edition. Michael Dial, Rich Petty with you. Michael on the left, Rich on the right. Good afternoon, Rich. How are you?
Very good, Michael. How about you?
Good. We are going to chat about the conference finals, which is approximately in the middle, although the way some of the series are going, it might as well be the end of the conference finals in the next couple of days. But we'll talk about that as time goes. I just want to give a quick shout out to Winnipegger Amy Martin, who is officiating the women's U18 game as we speak between Canada and Finland. Great job, Amy. I've seen a lot of your work at the U18 level here in the province, and it's a much well-deserved honor. Congratulations. The game right now is scoreless between Canada and Finland with about 14 minutes left in the second period. So I just thought I'd get that out there very quickly. Red, how's your week been?
Good. I've been enjoying hockey.
Have you been enjoying it, or has it been kind of so far?
Well, I've enjoyed one series tremendously and one series not as much, but that's sometimes the way it is. That's, we talked about Colorado and Edmonton and just, Edmonton beat Calgary and you have to give them full measure. They didn't fluke that. They played at another level, but it really was Draisaitl and McDavid playing out of their minds for that whole round that Calgary had nothing to handle them and Colorado, they come with a little bit of a different mix. They're faster. They move the puck quicker. Calgary's more of a grinding a team. Colorado's a fast team, and McDavid and Draisaitl just haven't been able to get going. And if they don't get going, Edmonton's not scoring. So it's that simple. They drive the bus, and for the first three games, especially the last one, they've been shut out, and so it's been very different from the series against Calgary, and so it just shows you how good Colorado is and what their game plan is. That's really matched up well against Edmonton. So, but I haven't enjoyed that series as much. I've enjoyed the other series a lot more, Tampa Bay and New York Rangers. How about you?
Yeah, no, I agree. To be honest, I'm not overly shocked at how lopsided this Colorado Edmonton series has been. And I say lopsided from the standpoint that I really don't feel the Oilers have been the better team in a lot of the games. Colorado, full credit to me, deserves to be up 3-0 and a chance to go to the Stanley Cup final tonight. You know what? I had a question come in from Rob, which I want to address right off the hop here. And I'm going to preference it by saying it has to do with the Evander Kane scenario from the last game. Evander Kane cross-checking Nazem Kadri into the board and getting a one-game suspension for it. I know the preference of this question because Rob and I have gone back and forth on this yesterday and the day before.
Yeah.
So I'll pose the question to you, and I'll put it on the screen so people know what we're talking about. Question for both of you regarding the Kane suspension. Was it the right amount of games given the injury suffered by Kadri, plus taking into account past action? For those that don't know, Kane was suspended one game for a cross-check into the boards on Nazem Kadri, which we've subsequently come to find out has broken Nazem Kadri's thumb. Kadri, although not officially ruled out for the remainder of the playoffs, is unlikely to play the rest of the way, although not having been officially ruled out. Where do you sit on this Evander Kane thing before I give my opinion?
Well, it's kind of interesting. If it was, and I hate saying this, but I'm going to get this out of the way first.
Right.
If it was Evander Kane cross-checking a player like Nick Ehlers or pick your high offensively skilled and very like takes a very rare penalty, never
Yep.
is dirty, never is after the whistle or whatever, and that guy got hurt, then you'd be really upset and you'd say, "Oh, that's really unfair," and it still is unfair because Nazem Kadri could potentially be gone from Colorado's lineup for the rest of the playoffs. But that being said, any other player other than Nazem Kadri, you'd say, "Oh, that's a shame." But it'd be no different than if Nazem Kadri cross-checked Kane and Kane broke his thumb and Kane was out. You say,
Right.
"What's this?" It's these two guys. These are the types of guys that do this stuff, and it's no surprise that Kane did it and that Kadri received the end of it because Kadri he's that type of he gets under your skin, and Kane probably had enough of it and gave him a shot, and it was wrong. It was dirty. He got penalized. I don't know how many games. See, I don't like suspending guys. This is just my opinion. I don't like suspending guys as a result or by how many games they get as a consequence of how severe the injury is and how
Right.
much the play. Like if it's a bad cross check and the guy he bounces back, it should be a 2-game suspension. If he's cross checked and he's out for the rest of the playoffs, it should be a 2-game suspension. Like to me, it's the act is what should be penalized, not how injured is the guy. But that being said, I'm also of the opinion, I've thrown this out to you before because I know you want to give me your opinion. In something like this, especially in the playoffs, especially in my mind, minimum, Evander Kane should be suspended for as long as Edmonton is still in this round against Colorado. Like if the Colorado Avalanche lose Nazem Kadri for 2 more games in this series, Evander Kane should be out for 2 more games in the series. And then we can reevaluate for the next round, depending if Edmonton gets through or not. It might be a moot point because Edmonton might only play 1 more game. But there's something to be said. Like I agree with the right penalty and the right consequence for the act, not for the consequence of the act and how severe the injury is. But at the same time, the team that loses the player, I'm also of the opinion that that player should really, the player that made the penalty and that caused that other player to be injured. Now he's out for 3 games potentially against Edmonton. Evander Kane should sit for 3 games. He should not, because he removed Nazem Kadri, you remove yourself from the series and it's a wash. That would smarten it up. That would be a consequence, especially in the playoffs where this kind of stuff would stop. But then I'm kind of arguing against myself because I just said it shouldn't be as a consequence of how severe the guy's injured, right? But
Right.
I kind of wrestle with it because I'm you and I know this, right? You could see a guy get cross-checked really badly into the boards. You say, "Oh my gosh, what happened?" And he goes in with his neck, whatever. He's down for a second. And he shakes it off, and he's okay. There's no concussion, nothing. He just turned the right way, and he has no injury, and he keeps on playing. And it's very fortunate, right? And then the same cross-check later on, the guy can have a fractured spine and be in a wheelchair. So it's. I don't know. How about you?
Well, here's the thing. I'm perplexed by the original call at the moment.
Why?
Because remember, they said it's a 5-minute penalty for, I think they said cross-checking, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, I thought it was boarding, but okay.
It's boarding or cross-checking.
Yeah.
To me, this is one of very few instances, Rhett, where the guy gets a 5-minute penalty and can continue in the game.
Right.
Usually,
I don't know the rules that much. Maybe you know it. I always thought if a guy got a 5-minute major for a penalty, high sticking, boarding, cross-checking, when you got a 5-minute major, it was an automatic game misconduct. But it's not, obviously.
It's not. And there's certain instances where it's, automatic 5. And I would say 95% of what I've seen in hockey, a major accompanies the game misconduct.
So is it at the discretion of the ref in that moment? Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's discretionary in the moment. I was really surprised there was no misconduct. I'm on record of saying that I believe it shouldn't have been more than 2 game suspension. just based on precedent. Now,
Yeah.
you could argue it's a reckless play, which it was. He hit him into the boards right on the number. That's the kind of hit you wanna that's the kind of hit you wanna eliminate from hockey.
Yep.
But do I here's the question, and it's often compared to, Mark Scheifele and Jake Evans. Oh, Scheifele gets, 4 games for that, or 5 games, whatever it was for that reckless hit. I think it wound up being 4 games.
Yep.
Um, and then, oh, he kind of threw him into the net after the fact, and it was clearly obvious, clearly charging. He comes from feet away. He doesn't let up. Like, to me, to compare the two is like comparing apples to oranges. Do I like the play? No, I will admit to that. Do I think it's a suspension beyond 1 game? Eh, probably, but based on NHL precedent,
Yep.
we can't be shocked that it's, you know, 1 game or 2 games.
Yep. I get the feeling, I don't know if you sense this too, or you noticed this over the years. I get the feeling just in general that for the exact same fraction or the exact same guy doing the exact same thing against the exact same player in the exact same situation during the regular season, the penalty or the number of games suspended always seems to be more than what it is in the playoffs. It's almost like in the playoffs, there's
Yeah.
a completely different bar that you have to meet
Yep.
in that the judgment or the consequence is not as severe because they just don't want to pull a player out of the lineup which could potentially impact that team's ability to play as well as they can. If that makes sense, it just seems like that in the playoffs. Just because you'd think this would be like 2 or 3 games during the regular season, but
It would be, and to be honest, it probably would be. I think the best way to kind of sum it up, Rick,
yeah,
the NHL views playoff games of more importance or carrying more weight than
yeah,
regular season games. So basically, I've heard it
okay,
said before,
yeah.
1 playoff game is the equivalent of 2 regular season games, or
Okay, so because they view the games as being of more
yeah,
importance in terms of what's on the line with them,
yeah.
that's why 1 playoff game is the equivalent of 2 or 3 regular
So
season games.
I
Okay.
don't know if that's, the appropriate way to go, but that's the way I've heard it explained. Is that I'm missing 2 regular season games is the equivalent of missing 4 2 playoff games, sorry, the equivalent of 4 regular season games.
Right.
So
But that's not an official marker.
no,
That's just sort of the
no, it's just an
unspoken,
observation on
unwritten.
my part,
Okay. Okay.
right? And
Mhm.
to be honest with you, I would consider what Shifley did to Jake Evans in the regular season a 6 or 8 game suspension. Um, there's no time or place for that game, for that to happen in the game. Rob has a follow up, and that is, so say supposedly, let's say the player was Nathan McKinnon, Gabriel Landeskog, Mateo Rantanen, or Kel McCarr instead of Kadri. Would that make a difference?
It shouldn't.
Right, it shouldn't. Um, and that's the part, right? And
Yeah.
Rob, you and I have had, respectful discussions about this. I believe you're in the frame of mind that, Kane should have gotten similar or more than Shifley did in that instance. Um, my stance about the whole scenario is just that, given on precedent of what the Department of Player Safety has come down with,
Yeah.
1 to 2 games is right in line with what the Department of Player Safety has done previous. So, and there's a lot of legalities and legal ramifications for suspending a guy longer. Um, you can't just say an instance in the regular season and decide to slap, a 5 game suspension on him just because you want to change the precedent. The
Right.
player has arbitrary right to appeal every suspension, rightly or wrongly. Um, and so it's very difficult. It would be easy to say, okay, you know what he did is warranted 5 playoff games. Well, okay, the player says, yeah, I don't agree with that. I'm going to appeal that scenario. So it's a very slippery slope because the NHL doesn't want their best players or players suspended. They would rather have players um, on the ice.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, it's a very interesting scenario, and there are a lot of circumstances that go into certain things.
Yeah.
And I hate to say local hockey is the same as the NHL, but the way things work in local hockey is there's a precedent for a scenario. Let's say it's a checking from behind that carry the game misconduct. Because it's local hockey, they have a precedent. This is the minimum number of games. You can go in line with the minimum or over as you see fit. So let's just say a checking from behind carried automatic 3 games. I don't have the rule book in front of me. You can call it 3 games, but you can't go less than that.
Yeah.
So it's a very dangerous slope based on precedent. You can't erratically change the precedent of a very fast game, and there's a lot of protocols, and um, there's a lot of things that go into it. Not the least of which is the officials' report and interviews with the officials and everybody involved.
Right.
So
See,
is it
but no, I was just
sorry?
going to add though. I was just going to add though. You're asking, oh, would it be any different if it was Landeskog or Rantanen
Yeah,
or McKinnon or Makar? But
yeah.
you could argue that I mean Nazem Kadri was as important a player for Colorado throughout the regular
See,
season and into
that's
the
the
playoffs
other side of
as
it.
any other player. He's better than a point a game. He goes up against the other team's stronger offensive lines because he's very good defensively. He's gritty. He's good in the faceoff circle. He's their third line center. Like I'm just saying, I or second or third line center, depending upon how they play McKinnon and Landeskog. But I'm just saying he is a valuable part of Colorado. I think Colorado's still going to beat Edmonton, but if Colorado advances or when they advance, it's going to be interesting to see the impact of not having Nazem Kadri in that lineup, whoever they play in the finals, whether that's New York Rangers or Tampa Bay. So I don't know. I think it's still going to hurt Colorado, and you could argue he's as important to Colorado as any of those other
Yeah.
players you mentioned, but for different reasons. So
Yeah, and you know what? I'll be the first to come out and say it. Without Nazem Kadri, I don't think the Colorado Avalanche are where they are given their injuries.
yeah, so yeah. So
And
anyway,
you could argue the Leafs haven't been the same, up the middle. Granted, they have John Tavares now, but Nazem Kadri, people don't realize that Nazem Kadri is a good player. You know, I think he deserves to be in the same breath as Rantanen, McKinnon, Landeskog. I mean, he was at or near the top of the Avalanche scoring record. So just because it's McKinnon, not McKinnon, McKinnon, Drysdale, those types of players,
yeah,
don't undersell the value of Nazem Kadri to the Colorado Avalanche.
no, you're right. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next few games. So, but yeah,
And the interesting part to me, like I know we talked about Colorado having a lot of injuries. The effects of missing um the effects of missing Nazem Kadri might not be affected in this series versus either the Rangers or Tampa Bay in the long term, right? It's often said, right? You can mask a guy's injury, play without a guy for a certain period of time, but there comes a point after uh, there comes a certain period of time after where there's a certain number of games where that guy's value is really missed more
Yeah.
so than games 1 through 4. So let's just
Yeah.
say games 5 through 7. That's where you really feel the effects of the guy not in your lineup. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think the same could be said for the goaltender there, Dusty Kemper, who has a reported concussion. Pavel Francouz has been very good. Uh,
Very good. Yeah.
and to be honest with you, I had a discussion with a Colorado Avalanche fan, uh, watching Game 2 together at an establishment. I asked him, I said, "How crazy is it for Colorado to keep Francouz over Dusty Kemper long term if they could only keep one?" And he said that's not an outlandish a statement as you think.
Yeah.
And in fact, this guy went also along a lot of the same lines, but he believes in the long term, Francouz will be more valuable to the Colorado Avalanche than Darcy Kemper. And the other situation too is it's one thing to be a backup. We've all seen good backups. Oh, this guy's ready to be a number one, right? That guy's ready to be a number one. And that guy becomes a number one, and all of a sudden his numbers start to drop from what he and yes, that individual has now chimed in on the chat as well, um, which is interesting. But no, I think it's a completely different thing being a number two and then a number one, and then going from a number two to a number one. Not everybody can make that transition. Um, it took
Mhm.
UC Zaros quite a while to establish number one in Nashville. Uh,
Mhm.
so it's just very interesting, right? And I'm still of the mindset that Pablo Francouz is a long term option for the Avalanche over that of Dusty Kemper. And I'm not really surprised that the Avalanche have kept rolling without Kemper based on the resume of Pablo Francouz.
Mhm.
Let's quickly talk, Rich, if you don't mind, about the other series, which was if you watch the first 2.5 hockey games in aren't danger of being 3-0, much like the other series, but we just already talked about. Um, what's your take on this Rangers Tampa? And Rich, I can't help but wonder if the Rangers suddenly awoke a sleeping bear and now we might have Tampa crawl back into this series.
Mhm. Yeah, well, I hope so. I mean, you and I have both selected Tampa Bay in a lot of games. So the fact that they've lost two already to New York, that bodes well for both you and I in terms of our prediction. But I don't think either one of us thought they'd lose two in a row at the beginning. But I don't know. You know what? Honestly, New York,
Go
the
ahead, Rich.
Rangers.
I'm just displaying some comments
Okay.
that have come in.
Yeah, New York Rangers have played Tampa Bay really tough. In fact, they've given them way more trouble than Toronto did or Florida in terms of their speed, their defensive play, their ability to clog up the neutral zone. Their coverage in their own end. They play very well defensively against Tampa Bay. And even though Tampa Bay won yesterday afternoon, it was a last minute goal or in the last few minutes. There was a beautiful goal to make it 3-2 and they won the game. But overall, New York has played much better than Tampa Bay and taken the play to them. And I think that right now the Lightning are a little bit overwhelmed by the Rangers' skill and speed. And I'm not sure how you overcome that. Maybe also Vasilevsky hasn't looked as good overall as Shesterkin. So, I mean, look at Tampa Bay had to get like 90 shot attempts on Shesterkin yesterday and 45 shots in total compared to the Rangers 20 or 25 and still only won the game 3-2. So I'm just saying, like Tampa Bay's had to work just to get the one win. So it'll be interesting. I'm just surprised that the Rangers are able to do it to Tampa Bay. But then the other side of me says, you know what? They're younger, they're hungry, and they play a style that maybe Tampa Bay is not used to playing against so far with Florida and with Toronto. So all marks to the Rangers. I hope that Tampa Bay wins another one at home and then it becomes a 3-game series. That's what I'm hoping for. But I don't know. The Rangers have played them tough, and that's really surprising to me. I thought Tampa would have a much easier time with Rangers than they did with Toronto, never mind Florida. And the Rangers have been their toughest challenge so far. How about you? How do you see it?
I'm not entirely surprised, Rhett. Um,
And why didn't you pick the Rangers?
to be honest, wow, just based
Well,
on experience. Just based on experience at this time of year, right? The logic says Tampa's been here before.
yeah,
I should ask the same question of you. Why did you pick Tampa? But no,
because I didn't pick them in the first 2 rounds, and it was my mistake. And I'm not making that mistake a third time in
right,
a row.
right.
Or at
So
least I may be now. Depends how it all plays out. But yeah.
that being said, though, Red, when the Rangers went down to Pittsburgh, I think it was 3-1.
Yep. They won 3 in a row against the Penguins.
Yeah,
Yep.
so there was a lot of discussion about, oh, the moment becoming too big for Eder Shesterkin. He's been excellent. And you know
Yep.
what? He just about stole them yesterday's game too. That was one bounce away from being a 3-0
Yeah.
series. Contrary to what the shots on goal were yesterday.
Mhm.
And I think it's interesting just from the standpoint that when you talk about um when you talk about goaltending, you could make an argument the first 2 games of the series could have gone Tampa's way too. Absolutely. Maybe minus the first game where, it's that we had a week off. We're coming off of um that 1 day break between rounds. So
Yeah, they looked flat.
but game 2 to me could have gone either way.
Yeah.
For sure. We could be just as much making the argument for Tampa being up 2-1 as the Rangers being up 2-1. Vasilevsky was good yesterday. Shesterkin was good the game before. I think yesterday, finally, we saw that glimpse, I think, of the goaltending duel that everybody thought we would see between those two. I don't know how you see that, but to me, the Rangers are right with them. Um, Maybe better or not entirely surprising given, the Rangers' track record in elimination game. But to
Yeah.
go into Carolina and win a game 7 and be as so calm, cool, and collected as Shesterkin was, I think we're seeing exactly right now why um why the Rangers were so high on Eder Shesterkin and why
Yeah.
they were so, I guess, easily able to move on from Henrik Lundqvist minus his health issues aside.
Yeah.
Um, they were in good hands, and they will continue to be in good hands, I think, as far as I'm concerned. And I can't help but notice the younger Vasilevsky on the other side of the net. And as far as I'm concerned, these are two of the top 5 goalies in the world, depending how you rank them. And that could be an episode of an off-season show, top 5 in different positions in the NHL. But I truly believe Vasilevsky is the best goalie in the world. I think you could make an argument for Shesterkin being number 2 or number 3 in
Okay.
the top, for sure in the top 5. Uh,
Okay.
and again, it's a lot of these games, they come down to one bounce and, one good goaltending performance can shift the series in your favor.
Yep.
And I think what we saw last night with was a team that didn't want to go quite easily.
Mhm.
I had concerns at 2-0 And I made the comment, oh, it looks like Tampa's reign is over, just given, the unfortunate penalties that led to the 2-0 goals, both of which by Corey Perry, if I might add, who hasn't exactly been very effective in this series. But, you can't help but wonder if a game like yesterday is one that wakes up the bear and gets the champion off the mat.
Maybe. I mean, they had to win that game. I don't think. See, I don't believe in all these different cliches and
Right.
awaken the giant and da da da. Da. Tampa Bay's up against a good team. These last four teams are good teams. To beat one of the team that you're up against, you're going to have to play even better than you did in the first two rounds. And the Rangers have ramped up their game. They're getting better and better. They were good against Pittsburgh. They're even better against Carolina. And now they've ramped it up against the defending Stanley Cup champions. So kudos to them. And I mean, the Tampa Bay, they just looked slow and they looked a little bit disinterested, a little bit overwhelmed the first two games in New York. Now they're a veteran team. They bounced back last night. They had to win yesterday afternoon. They had to. If they go down 3-0, it's over. But now you got to win again. It's crucial they win game four. I've told you before, game four is that linchpin game in a 7-game series. Whoever wins game four, I think, wins the series, that wins a 7-game series like 3 out of 4 times, around 75%. It's a linchpin game because you either go to 2-2 and make it a 3-game series, or you go down 3-1. Now means you got to win 3 in a row. So Tampa Bay has to win it. I think they're going to play even better, but Rangers are going to give it all they've got. It's going to be another. I think it's going to be another close game. I think it's going to be another 2-2, 3-3 game going into the third period, and then whoever makes a mistake or whoever makes some special play like Kucherov did yesterday. And I just want to say, I mean, you talk about McDavid, Draisaitl, McKinnon, all these great players, the best players in the world. That pass that Kucherov made, after getting that pass from Hedman up top, stopping it and looking over shoulder and giving a backhand, threading the needle there to Palat for a one-timer to bear. I mean, how many guys, never mind making that pass, never mind making it, can actually see it in their mind and think of doing it in the moment that you have to do it, while there's still a moment that you can do it before the guy gets a stick in the way.
Right. And then the other way, you could say that the same thing for Palat, right? He had the presence of mind to go to the front of the net and expect that pass coming.
Yeah,
because
if you play with Nikita Kucherov, I bet you they do stuff like that in practice over and over and over again.
So it's two ways. As much as we say that pass needs to get there, he needs to stay there to receive that pass.
Correct. Well, Palat has to move
be dead at any point.
Yes, but I still think if you practice with Kucherov, you know this. You're always moving. You're moving into open spaces. The same as when you play with McDavid. You got to go to open space, go to the net for deflections, for tips, because he'll find you. But I just say that pass is just in that pressure point, in that moment of the game where everybody's playing so well defensively, and be able to make that pass and think about it and then execute it, put it on Palat's stick and Palat scores. That is world class. There, I don't know how many guys in the league. Maybe McDavid can do that. Draisaitl. Wow, like he is a special. And I'm not a huge Kucherov fan. I'm not a huge Tampa Bay fan, but that was a special hockey play to win a game.
Where was that in the first round, right? He was a late round pick, and it's like, if we would have seen this coming, he would have been a top 10 pick. Yeah. He's certainly playing like it. One would suggest, but he looks like that.
He's a very special player, Kucherov.
As well. Hey, Rith, I have a question for you before we chime in on some coaching openings that Rob would like opinions on.
Okay.
And that is as follows. And I asked the question of Rob and, a couple of other people last night. Where are you as far as giving, and again, this is just Michael's version of the commissioner of the NHL, but if I have my way, I would tweet this. And then just, 3 a.m. things that I think about, rightly or wrongly. Where are you as far as if you're a general manager and you've won home ice advantage, so you have game 7 at home? right? If you did home ice advantage in that series.
Mhm.
If you were given an option to choose the order in which the games are played in the series in which building. So, for example, if you had the choice to take games 1 and 2 on the road versus 1 and 2 at home, what would you take and why?
You're saying doing something like taking the first 2 on the road and then playing 3 at home or something, and then going 1-1 after that, you're saying?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Um, for me personally, I know, there's always well, if you can split on the road and come back, you can win 3 in a row and then you win the series in 5 games. Yeah, okay. And what happens if you lose the first 2 on the road and now you're in a 2-0 hole and you were the better team and had the better record? To me, I just don't see I could see the vast majority of general managers going by the old faithful. You win the right to play at home first by having the better record, by having more points. You want to start off at home and use that to your advantage and get up 2-0 and make a statement at home before going on the road. That's the way you have to look at it. For me, I wouldn't change a thing. I'd want it exactly the way it is, playing at home first. How about you? You'd want to go on the road first and then play 3 at home?
To me, if it was the first round of the playoffs and I had the choice, I think I'd go on the road. Because
Yeah.
because to be honest with you, I have just as good a chance or opportunity, I guess, to lose the first 2 games at home than I do to win the first 2 on the road. Less likely, but possible. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
people are saying it's possible you could win the first 2 on the road, or the first 2 at home. I'd argue it's also extremely possible, to lose, both of them on at home, right? So,
But then you
I
don't,
don't
if
know.
you're losing your games at home, then you don't deserve um to be winning the first round if you lose your games at home. So to me, to me, it's all
Yeah.
about getting out of the gate and using that to your advantage. That's why you play the season. I mean, if it really doesn't matter, home ice advantage, why don't you just say who are the best teams and throw all the teams into a big sack and start pulling out teams 1 versus 8, 2 versus 7, and just knock yourself out?
Well,
You play.
I guess, Rich, I'm just wondering, like, what are we playing for home ice? Are we playing for the right to have game 7 at home or the right to start at home?
Both,
It,
both,
it's an interesting
both,
dynamic.
both.
Okay.
More home games and you start at home. That it's Michael, there's a reason why every major league sports or major sports league that has 7-game series, the team with the better record or the higher seed, whatever you want to call it, plays at home first. Because there's no other way that it makes more sense for them to go that way. So to me, I don't know. It's interesting to think of, okay, you go on the road for 2 and then you go 3 at home, then you go 1 on the road, and then if you get to 7, then you play the last one at home. But you're putting yourself potentially in the hole down 2-0, which means you've got to now win 4 of the next 5 games. Like, think about that against a good playoff team, especially in the East where teams 1 versus 8 weren't separated by a lot in terms of points and wins. So I'm just saying, I just don't see how a general manager would think that's to your advantage. You're really rolling the dice to me. But
Yeah. Yeah, it's just interesting, right? Because, there's different scenarios that come into play for sure. Um Rob asked about coaching openings. Um has your preference changed about any of the remaining openings? Um or is it possible the teams are further along in filling their openings than we're led to believe?
I think some teams are. I would tell you this. This is what I will tell you, because I think you told me that after the last game if the Stanley Cup Finals goes to Game 7, then there's roughly 14 days, 2 weeks between
Correct.
Game 7 scheduled and the draft. Yes?
Yep, approximately, yes.
Approximate. Okay. So to me, in my mind, if you're asking me to bet or what do you think that's going to happen, I don't think any team is going to make any decision on their new head coach or coaching staff or whatever until the playoffs are over. Because I think, number one, they don't want to deflect from the playoffs. Number two, they want to have time to kind of assess everybody that's potentially available to them. And number three, they want their excitement and their fire about their hiring and what they're doing to not be competing with the finals and Stanley Cup. So I think you're going to see a whole bunch of teams making announcements on their coaching staffs and head coaches in that first week after the playoffs is over, because they want those coaches to be meeting with them and with their scouts and everything else to get them all on the same page when they go to the draft, because you got to have your head coach in your group for the draft. To me, I don't know how you could be shoveled AF and not have who your head coach is on draft day, because you want his input on trades and picks and what do you see is if you're going to talk all about that before what your future is the next 3 to 5 years, 7 years with the coach. And then that's going to impact who you sign, who you trade for, who you pick. All those things is going to have a huge impact on that. So to me, that's the way it is. But let me throw this back at you. Who is out there right now? Like, who do you think is a viable candidate for the Jets for head coach besides Barry Trotz, and then as a 1B, Scott Arniel? Because I heard this thrown around that the reason why they want Scott Arniel is because Trotz and him have worked together, and Trotz, he doesn't want to coach for another 10 years. He only wants to go to a place where there's a management position for him waiting in the wings in the next 3 to 5 years. And so he wants a coach underneath him to work with him, then to become his associate coach or be his associate coach, and then take over when he moves into a management position, whether it's general manager or assistant general manager or hockey ops or whatever. So I could see why the Jets have Scott Arniel there to play head coach or associate head coach with Barry Trotz. But who else do you think the Jets have on their radar screen besides Trotz?
Well, I think the names that have been out there are interesting, right? Arniel, Trotz.
Don't say Tortorella. Don't say
No,
Tortorella.
Tortorella's a far.
You won't sign Dubois if you sign Tortorella.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because you know you look at Wait, I was listening to 32 Thoughts, the podcast today with Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merritt,
Yep.
and I forget the context of the question, but you know, Friedman was asked about the Jets being loyal to the likes of Arneal, to Jim Montgomery, uh, and all of those types of people that True North has had experience with.
Yep.
And Friedman kind of made the argument that um, it's not loyalty per se. It's what um, it's that those individuals have familiarity with True North, have familiarity with the market. I didn't realize this, but Jim Montgomery, who is the former head coach of the Dallas Stars, is a former Manitoba Moose player.
Yep.
And I would tend to agree with Friedman that it's not about necessarily the loyalty, and I'm paraphrasing. Um, these are individuals that have familiarity with the market and the fans and the demands of going to Winnipeg.
Okay, but is that enough of I see to me that's
Well,
it
and
sounds
that's
all
the interesting
it
part,
sounds
right?
all
Because
cliched and cherries and whipping cream and rainbows and cotton
right.
candy. And
No, and I respect Elliot Friedman for that take. I just don't necessarily agree with it because to me, if you're in the NHL It's one of 32 jobs, and if you've already had NHL experience, chances are you've already been to Winnipeg, so you know what to expect uh,
Exactly. And
coming
it
here.
depends on the
So,
guy. I agree with you. Trotz, he can write his ticket. He's earned the right to weigh Philadelphia against Winnipeg, against Las Vegas, against whoever else, and say and be in a position to say, I want a management position that I want to move into in the next 3 to 5 years, and I'm willing to work with an associate coach to hand over those reins and that as I move into that position. He has earned that right to ask for that. And if he doesn't get it in Winnipeg, he will get it in Philadelphia or he will get it in Las Vegas. I don't know how easy that will be, but he'll get it somewhere. But then there's other guys that you wonder, I agree with you. They're not in that position to be so fussy and to make demands. They're, like you say, there's only 32 jobs, head coaching. Any of these guys would want to coach in Winnipeg versus not coaching in the NHL. So, but to your point, like with the coaches that we know, like are the Jets considering Alain Vigneault or Randy Carlyle? They're former Moose coaches with NHL experience. Why not those guys?
yeah, I don't know. And
Well, do you know with your connections, with who you are connected with, do you know if the Jets have interviewed anybody other than Trotz?
yes,
Who?
Arneal, Carlisle, those types.
Oh, they did interview. Okay.
Yeah, there has been multiple. It's my understanding.
Yeah.
I guess I should stop what I just said and tell you this, just for clarity's sake. My understanding and the connections that I have and the information that I've been able to ascertain. My understanding is along with a lot of other people that Trotz remains the number one option, rightfully so, and the guy that we want to have. Option number one, guys only have um, the number one option would be Barry Trotz. There have been secondary interviews with candidates. Um, there have been uh, candidates for me that have been interviewed, such as what I've just mentioned, um,
Yeah.
who, what's the best way to say this? They're been interviewed as secondary plan B, plan C, plan D, etc., etc., etc. So basically, due diligence if number one, which is Barry Trotz, doesn't pan out. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you have the it's kind of like this in any sort of circles. You have your ideal candidate, and then if ideal candidate doesn't come to light or doesn't work out,
Yeah.
you have A, you have B, C, and D further on down the list. But I guess my concern would be um, if you wait out and you wait out and you wait out on Barry Trotz and he says, "Oh, I don't want in on hockey this year," does that um, does that hurt your ability to get option uh, B, C, and D? Right?
Have you heard that Trotz is maybe wants to take an extra year off?
Yeah. Well, it's possible, but I would also make that suggestion to you, Rick, that True North has a pretty good indication on what it's going to take to get Barry Trotz signed. And I think if they had any indication otherwise, that they would be moving on to option B, C, and
Right.
D already. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And we haven't heard any rumor to that effect.
No,
That's what
I haven't heard anything
I know.
beyond.
That's the
Uh,
one thing about True North is when things are really, really quiet, you know what that means? There's tons of stuff happening in the background
yeah,
because they do such a good job of keeping stuff locked up and They only let go. They are so loyal to that organization and to Mark Chipman and Kevin Shell. The guys don't squirt stuff out. They don't leak stuff. Even when you hear Elliot Friedman say, "Oh, Jets are interested in a number of coaches." Yeah, okay. They have a head coaching position to fill. Sure. And then you can rattle off all the coaches that are available that have NHL experience. Oh, you think they're interested in Tortorella, Alain Vigneault, Randy Carlyle, and Jim Montgomery? You make the whole list. Sure. Because they're all head coaches. You could throw, that's all hearsay and whatever, but there's nothing concrete. And you know why? Because the Jets don't throw that stuff out there. They just say, "Oh, here's a press release. We interviewed Barry Trotz. Thank you very much." That's all that came out in the paper. The Free Press, I don't know if you saw it, there was like six paragraphs. And the whole point of the 6 paragraphs was the Jets have interviewed Barry Trotz.
Yeah.
And they didn't even say whether it was face-to-face or over the phone. So it just tells you the Jets are good at keeping a lid on stuff. And for me, the fact that it's quiet tells me there's lots going on. And I agree with you too. I think they're negotiating. They're trying to figure things out. They're working out with Trotz and even internally how they're going to have this succession planning happen with Trotz moving into some type of a management position with Cheveldayoff there and Chipman, however that works out, if they can work together. And if that happens, all of a sudden you're just going to see, I think it's going to be the day after the Stanley Cup is hoisted. They're going to hoist the Stanley Cup on the Thursday, and Friday, press release. Winnipeg Jets sign Barry Trotz to a 5-year contract as head coach with Scott Arniel as associate head coach. That's how it's going.
Again, I think, I don't want to speculate, nor am I reporting anything. Let's be clear.
You don't have to report. I'm speculating.
Yeah, no. I believe that the Winnipeg Jets, if Barry Trotz decides to coach, will have Barry Trotz as their head coach.
Okay.
But I also believe that it's good to have option B, C, and D ready.
Yeah.
True North has a pretty good indication, I would think, that they're in the front runner for Barry Trotz, or they're not, or they would have moved on already to B, C, and D. So to me, I'm of the mindset no news is good news. Yeah,
Okay.
in that scenario. Jim had a very good question, and this is a interesting one, but I wanted to kind of touch on.
Yeah.
He asked, "What is the fear of going off?" I guess he means off the board and getting a rookie head coach. So, i.e., a dive at Tampa used to have, right? The D. Boucher to John Cooper, although Cooper was, in the AHL at the time. He gets what or why, I guess, is there a fear of going off and getting a guy that's never coached in the NHL? Does that make any sense?
Right. But you're saying it's not that he's never coached, that he's never been a head coach. Like a Scott Arniel, you're saying, like some guy who was an associate coach or an assistant head coach underneath the guy who was very successful.
The question from Jim here is, what is the fear of going off and getting a rookie head coach? And I'm adding everybody that has been since everybody that everybody's talking about is familiar, known names.
Okay. Well, I will put this out there. You know what the risk is? The risk is that you have a guy that learns on the job and you alienate your players and your fans for a period of years. I'll give you an example. Dallas Eakins. He got hired by Edmonton, never had coached before, came in and started telling the players, not just coaching, but what to eat, when to eat it, how much cream you could put in your coffee, and all this stuff. And it ticked players off. And Eakins, he rubbed people the wrong way. And he actually admitted now he's coaching. Is he coaching? Is it San Jose? I don't know who's Eakins' coach. He was coaching Summit, but I don't know. But he admitted years later, he said, I made a mistake. I was so green and I didn't know how to handle these guys as professionals. And I had to learn on the job those first 3 to 5 years. Being an associate coach or an assistant coach is not the same as calling the shots and being a head coach. And it all falls on your lap. and I wasn't ready for it, and I wasn't mature enough, and I didn't know how to do it well. And you could run the risk. And look how that was a disaster for Edmonton. That was 3 years where they were just spinning their tires with him there. So I'm just saying, to me personally, we went with a rookie, somebody without experience in Claude Noel. He was a great coach, a great transition coach. And then you went with Paul Maurice. You went young. You had him for 9 years, did very well, a veteran coach. Now, to me, you need to go with a veteran coach who coaches defense first. Paul Maurice is more of a skating, freestyle, freewheeling. Claude Noel is more defensively oriented, but he was new to the NHL and he didn't know how to manage all the egos and the money at that level compared to junior hockey or compared to college hockey or even hockey in the AHL. So to me, you got to get somebody that has a proven winning track record. To me, has to be. To me, I don't know who you go with. If you don't go with Trotz, if you can't get Trotz signed, I don't know who's good enough. I don't know. I wouldn't want Tortorella here. I wouldn't want Randy Carlyle. Randy Carlyle rubs too many people the wrong way, just like Tortorella. He's very abrasive. Do you want to go with Alain Vigneault? You know, Alain Vigneault, he has not done much since he was okay in Vancouver. New York Rangers, they had a lot of talent there. He didn't do anything with them. They're only winning now with a different coach. Then he went over to Philadelphia. Philadelphia didn't do very well. So I'm just saying, Alain Vigneault, people say, oh, Alain Vigneault, you got to get him. He's a veteran coach. Yeah, but he has not won like Barry Trotz has won with whatever team he's gotten. So to me, it's Trotz.
It's interesting, right? And I think given where the Jets are in this trajectory, if it makes any kind of sense,
yeah,
putting a rookie head coach in this sort of veteran team is a mistake. I just don't know. Like, to me, you're not going to put a rookie head coach in Winnipeg with this type of team. I think if the Jets were teetering on a rebuild, they would allow a rookie head coach to grow with the team. The fact that this team is closer to contention than they are to a rebuild tells me that they have to go with a proven guy.
Yeah, and it's not even just a proven guy. I think it's even the fan base. The fan base is ready to win, and they want a proven winner to coach this team. That's what they want. Trotz is out there. They got to land Trotz. So anyway, we got to wrap it up here.
I know. I wasn't even watching the time here.
Okay, well, I'm watching it.
I'm just so enamored by this conversation.
Okay, Colorado and Edmonton. Does Edmonton have any chance of winning 4 in a row after Colorado won 3 in a row?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Does Edmonton have any chance of winning 4 in a row after Colorado has just won 3 in a row?
No, realistically.
Okay, so you and I still think Colorado's going to win. I think so too. Okay, I'm not sure if it's going to be a sweep and 4 straight, but it'll be maybe Edmonton wins once at home and then Colorado wins back at home and wins in 5 games. Okay, Rangers and Tampa Bay. I'm going to put it out there. I picked Tampa Bay in 6 games, and I still like Tampa Bay in 6 or 7 games. I really don't want him to win in 7 games because then you get to 2 points and I only get 1, and that really bothers me. But I still think Tampa Bay is going to win this game tomorrow night. They're going to tie the series up at 2-2 and make it a 3-game series, and I hope that they sweep and win in 6. So that's what I think. How about you?
Yeah, I think Colorado wraps it up. If not tonight, then on Wednesday.
Okay.
I think Tampa's still going to come back to win that series.
Okay.
Especially if they win tomorrow.
Okay.
I just think they wolf the Giant up off the mat. I hope I'm wrong. I'd love the Rangers in the Stanley Cup final, but
would the Jets get another first-round draft pick from New York if they make it all the way to the final?
Yeah, it'd be the first time in a while.
No. Would the Jets get another first-round draft pick from the New York Rangers if they make it to the final? That's what I'm hoping for. Maybe they get another one.
No.
And then if they win the cup, then they get another first-round draft pick. They'll get 3 first-round draft picks for Andrew Kopp.
I wish it was like that, but it's gonna be a 1 first rounder.
Okay. All right. So when are we meeting next for a show? We can't meet next
It'll
Monday, I don't
probably
think.
be 1 week from. Oh, actually, no, we're on our way back
Yep.
from a family function. I would say we'll be back probably next Tuesday or Wednesday night or whenever Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final
Okay.
begins. I'm hearing it sounds like the Stanley Cup Final, regardless of when these series will wrap up, would start next Wednesday.
Okay. Okay. Well, we could do that. I will flex to that. Whatever works for the schedule. So sounds
Yeah.
good.
So that would be good. Just because we're in transit on the way back to town next week around this time.
Yep.
I would presume we'll be back Tuesday or Wednesday of next week for sure.
Sounds good.
Okay, I will see you later in the week, Rick. On board a airplane, a plane. Until then, have yourself a good week. For everybody else, have a great week. Thank you very much for watching, and we will chat with you next week on the show at some point. For Red Petty, Michael Justin, thank you very much. Stay tuned at 9 o'clock in about 2 hours and 56 minutes. It's going to be the Canadian Football Countdown annual CFL Fantasy Draft and Prop Bet Special. That comes your way at 9 o'clock tonight with myself, Ryan, Trey, and Adam. So for Red Petty, this is Michael Justin. Thank you very much. Have yourself a great rest of your evening, great rest of your week, and we'll chat shortly. Good night from Winnipeg.